this is a panel discussion. I'll introduce the guests shortly. I'm here because when Studio first came out, I was so excited to see what its potential was, and I spoke at sessions about it at conferences. And the new changes that we saw in the keynote yesterday and in the session earlier today got me just really excited about it again. So I'm so happy to have you guys up here to talk about it. Awesome. So we have Wesley Powell, Director of Engineering at Claris, Reverend Dr. Andrew Lacates, down at the end there, who I've known since we were in our 20s.
Something like that. Yes.
Yeah. And Javier Dura. So Claris partner and trainer and developer, and what was your other thing? Technical content creator.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah, so you do FileMaker Magazine in Spain.
right.
Okay.
It.
So let's see. I think two things I would throw out there. Well, I presume everybody here was at the opening session, but watch the video again because there was some really phenomenal content there. And Joris' session earlier today was amazing, so you really should watch that because it was such a clear demo of the features, the exciting features that are coming. So the first question I'll have for the panel is, what is the overall goal? This is really kind of for you, Wesley. The overall goal and direction for Studio. You kind of hit on it a little bit, but I really want to know, what's the sort of the long-term vision? Andy, you look like you want to answer it.
Well, I kind of do, in as much as, in the keynote, we're expressing the idea of the platform architecture for FileMaker Studio and Connect, right? And that we want to allow our developers to have the right tools for the right job to solve pervasively in their organization. And we need to be able to solve for those internal ops apps, those mission-critical business apps that need to scale for internal audiences that are reasonably predictable, that have lots of data and complex workflows, and FileMaker is that. For Studio, it's really predicated on the external audience. It's the unknown audience with devices you can't predict and maybe a scale you can't predict or that is dynamic. If you work with a school and you're in registration season, the scale gets really large and then it gets very small again soon thereafter. We need a tool that can, satisfy for those kind of use cases. I'll let Wes go into, I guess, maybe the details on how he thinks of it. But right now, that's what we're trying to do is give the FileMaker developer, the Claris developer, more tools to extend their reach. So.
I'll jump in. From an engineering point of view, I see it as a complement to one another. From my perspective, there's a lot of amazing things FileMaker can do, the database engine, all the technology we've been building over many decades, and some really cool use cases that FileMaker can solve uniquely from being offline to being on-prem. So as Andy said, from a technical point of view, Studio opens up an opportunity for the platform to solve new use cases with dynamic load, dynamic user account, and I think the two technologies married together, getting their data represented across the platform is going to be amazing and let us solve a lot more problems that we couldn't solve up until that point.
Javier, I suspect that you, like me, want it to be a lot more than that. Tell me, what do you want it to be? What's your wish for Claris Studio to become?
Well, I think that Claris Studio is, of course, a big product, but we need to use it. I mean, we are Claris partner, and I think that Claris, as a company, wants to have our feedback of this new product. Because if we don't use it ourselves, it would be difficult to sell this product to any of our regular customers. So, in fact, what we did as we are hosting an event in Valencia, Spain, and so far we are doing this using FileMaker Web Direct. So for next year, 2025, everything will be with Claris Studio, plus Claris Connect, plus FileMaker Server. So all the registration process, everything is done with Claris Studio.
There's a phrase, eat your own dog food. Which maybe doesn't translate well into other languages, but basically use your own technology to solve your own company's business problems, which is why I was so impressed when Claris switched to Salesforce for all of their internal tracking. I wasn't impressed. When FileMaker, I think, probably would have done a better job with that. Anyway, that's a totally different panel discussion. So using your own, I totally agree, and like switching to it, I think is great. What do you kind of wish it's going to become in 3 years?
Well, maybe they
some
know
number
better
of
than
years.
me.
No, I'm asking you what you.
Ah.
I have dreams, but I'm trying to moderate rather than express my opinions about it. But if you don't, I totally will.
Well, I saw many things yesterday that I like concerning the UI UX of Claris Studio, which is great. So, in fact, I was wondering if maybe FileMaker Pro will receive all these new interface in the future, or maybe they are thinking more about giving away or forgiving FileMaker Pro. I don't think so. And that everything start using Claris Studio online. But I guess that Claris Studio needs more time, more features, and then we will be able to use it in the complete platform, as we are doing with our event Studio Connect, because so far the connection with FileMaker Pro, you mentioned yesterday, is really slow. We cannot use this in a production environment, of
Great.
course. So in fact, in our event, we are using Claris Connect. A new record is created in Claris Studio. It triggers a flow in Claris Connect, and a new record is created in FileMaker Pro. It works like a charm, no problem. So do we think you should improve this connection in the future? So the transition from Claris Studio to FileMaker Pro, then it will be really useful.
So,
FileMaker has a 35-year head start on Studio, right? So it's hard for me to imagine what Studio is going to look like in 35 years.
it also has 35 years of baggage.
I don't. Okay.
Oh, you said to be nice.
I don't see it that way because I think it's pretty good product.
No, it
Yeah.
absolutely is. But I mean, there's things in it that, like the limitations of Draco Engine and things like that
Yeah.
that are completely solved by Claris Studio's much more modern, appliance-based.
Well, exactly,
backend.
right. And you can't just sort of change some of the fundamental precepts of FileMaker overnight
Right.
to solve for those. So hence adding on a tool set that allows us to do that better.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that it's easy to dismiss Connect as not being fundamentally important in the platform architecture, and I think there's an opportunity for Connect to really be the logical centerpiece of the whole platform in how it drives FileMaker and Studio to
Yeah.
solve your sort of business architecture for how you want to
Yeah,
build software.
That leads me to the next thing I really want to talk about, which is AI. So in your demo yesterday, that stands for artificial intelligence. In
I
your
haven't heard
demo
of that,
yesterday-
actually,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, I
Thank
just
you.
have to define your terms here. In all the things I've seen for Claris Studio, AI doesn't really come up, and I think Claris Connect is kind of the glue there. Is that what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's not yet, right?
Not
I
yet?
think AI is we're focused on building AI capabilities into FileMaker right now because that's where the data is. And I think there's a distinct advantage for our customer base in working with AI in that we have decades of accumulated data. And when we look out there at a lot of the new tools and ideas and startups that have been happening over the last 2 years, they're solutions looking for problems. They don't have the data yet. They don't know what to
that
do
phrase.
with it. And so I think we have a chance to deliver real value, right, with FileMaker. But yeah, we've got the connectors for OpenAI and Clarify and some of the other things that give us a chance to automate some process through Connect, which is very interesting. And I absolutely have seen some concept demos where AI confront Studio to do some magic, right? So I think there's a
Yeah.
future where AI will be very important to Studio. So.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about like the workflow. Like if you think about Studio's forms, there's not a lot of really AI things that can come there. I hope I didn't cut you off with your thoughts here. But if you mix FileMaker in, which is so mature and has these really, really good connections to it, and you can trigger something to happen easily from Studio to connect to FileMaker, let it do API calls and then get the information back to Studio, I think there's a huge amount you could do there.
There's a ton.
Yeah.
Let him talk.
Oh, I know. I was going to say. I was going to expand on Andy's answer. While Studio at this point in time doesn't have maybe AI capabilities immediately baked in or exposed to the end user, for developers and all of you, The plumbing's there in the form of the Studio connector that just launched and being able to use like the open API connectors and so forth. And what I wanted to kind of follow up from my presentation yesterday is that at the heart of Studio's design philosophy is adherence to the open API spec and the exploration of the connector being able to create schema and create views. So I very well imagine a world, and I'll kind of repeat what I mentioned yesterday, where through a natural language prompt, a user would be able to specify, I would like a CRM solution with X, Y, and Z capabilities. And through those integrations, and because the platform is so open and transparent, that could just come to life in front of the users. Yeah. Oh.
That's good stuff.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, why don't you expound then? Actually, so what's your take on that?
The AI?
Well, I mean, this discussion, like, I think having a partner here, it's not like an adversarial thing with FileMaker and partners, but I think it's really natural for us to want things that aren't necessarily on Claris's radar. And so I want you to be pretty direct about the things that you want that are like the missing things. For example, one of them that I think we can talk about is just the performance. Like if you have a table of 20,000 records in FileMaker and you push the button to move that table up to Studio, it stops working. You can't use it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need thousands of records. If you only have 100 records in FileMaker Pro,
Yeah.
Taking data from Claris Studio, it takes
Yeah.
a couple of minutes to make a simple search.
One of my favorite things I saw yesterday, Wesley, was when you talked about what the change is going to be. And I never can ask Claris when something's going to happen. But where is that in the priority stack?
And specifically, the mention of the ESS plus technology
yes,
moving
yes.
over from gRPC, that development is underway. Our goal is always as soon as possible. We're talking order of months, maybe ETS in weeks. So that it's an effort that's been ongoing. And what's great about the effort, as Javier mentioned, is the Studio API set that the FileMaker client and server are switching over to is the same one Connect uses. So what's cool about that, and your observations, Javier, is it's great to hear you have great performance with Connect, because that's like a crystal ball that once FileMaker Pro makes the switch over, the performance will be equal to Connect. So that's kind of an indicator and a preview of what that change means.
And why is this limitation when you try to import records in a Studio from a CSV?
Yes.
You only can import 1,000 records at a time.
Yep.
You can do it from FileMaker Pro, but it takes longer. So why is this limitation?
Yeah, great question. I'll give you an under-the-hood explanation. The import functionality for Studio was built kind of with the agile principles of minimum viable product. Our big goal for the import process in Studio was to really figure out less of the technical behind the scenes, which I'll kind of explain what's happening currently, but start those initial hooks of what the UI and user experience would look like. So we've been doing a lot of iterations on what the field mapping would look like, how that CSV process would come to light. We feel good and confident based on the feedback we've been receiving that the dialogue's performing well, the workflow's good. But to do that, our goal was to bring something to market as quickly as possible into everybody's hands. And by doing so, there's a key limitation, and that limitation is the browser is currently doing all the CSV processing. So on the client, it's doing the breakdown and all the heavy lifting, and so when the browser, there's a performance penalty for the browser to process the CSV, and then each record is inserted into the backend one record at a time. There's not a batch API that's integrated with yet. That batch API does exist, so in the near future you'll see a new import iteration where the server is doing the processing and doing the import rather than
In a big
the
batch,
client.
yeah.
So,
Be
good
faster
question.
import, more like a, yeah, that's
Like,
true.
yeah.
Well, I won't ask where that is in the priority queue, because, yes, I will.
That is high on the priority queue. Like I mentioned, our primary goal was the user experience of the import, and continue to give us feedback, and we're moving it as quickly as possible to the server.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, there's something else. I'm in Valencia, Spain, as I mentioned, so we speak Spanish, but our forms, our Claris Studio forms, we want them to be in Spanish and English as well. So I try to do it like in FileMaker using global variables or something like this, but it's not possible. I can read some text in Spanish, the send button, it says enviar, okay, that's fine. But the whole process behind the scene should be done in two different forms.
Okay.
So I made the English form and the Spanish form. But when I start doing the English form, I was searching for the duplicate form button, and there's no duplicate form button. Are you planning to make to improve this feature, to duplicate a form?
I have a short-term and a long-term answer for you. Because my short-term answer is yes. We have the capabilities internally to duplicate views, which would duplicate a form. My long answer is based on your use case, and what I hear your use case being is essentially the internationalization or multi-language support for a studio form. So the way I envision us solving that problem isn't through you as a developer having to duplicate a form for every language, but piggybacking some of the concepts we have in FileMaker with add-ons in the XML, where you have your view representation, but then each object has a corresponding dictionary of UI strings. And because Studio's UI is responsive and not fixed position, it would allow developers such as yourself to create your form in your native language, and then for each object or label or any string presented to the user, you would be able to specify, for German it should be this string, for Brazilian Portuguese this string, and so on. So you'd only have to create the UI once and then have multiple string representations. That's longer term though.
Okay.
That's cool.
So another question about this feature about languages. I am using some value list, taking values from another table.
Yes.
We can only use one value list and it's only in one language. For example, if I ask a question in my form, are you a Claris partner? In both forms, you can read yes/C, because there's no way to have the same value list in two different languages. Do you want my pencil to take notes?
That's not going to help you without an iPad.
I love it. I love it.
But give him a piece of paper, see what happens.
Love the use case, and I was trying to think through my answer there, and what I mean by that is I think my answer is the same, and let me expound a bit further. When I think about the use cases as developers, Claris developers that we're solving for, the value list is really a string representation of choices to give to the user. So expanding the previous idea of each object and label and placeholder string having a translated representation, I would propose and work with you, Javier, and say, does that same strategy work for the drop-down? Because I think it would, because then the drop-down value in English would be yes, no, and then for each of those values, you could have a string mapping for C and no, and language-based value list. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I go on?
Go on. I've got another question, but we've got time.
I love it.
Yeah, and another feature that we've been interested in is to have the opportunity to change visibility of more than one object at a time. You understand?
Yeah, I do. I love it. I feel like I'm at work right now. I work with Robert Holsey, who's on the product team.
To
And
be fair, you are at work right now.
that's true. And I always feel like I'm a genie, and Robert has to just ask, and I grant his wishes. So I'm happy to grant your wishes right now. One strategy.
Now it's a magic wand.
Yes. One of our first approaches to solve that use case is through groups. So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to play around with Studio groups, but the idea is you can have multiple objects in that group, similar to FileMaker, and then Studio also supports programmatic object appearance for the group. So based on the evaluation of that calculation, it would hide everything in the group. Is there something in your use case where that might not be an adequate solution that comes to mind?
I don't know, because I mean, I only test with this solution, but it can work. You know, the
Oh,
thing is
okay.
that we are using FileMaker, and we want everything that we have in FileMaker in Claris Studio.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
So
Yeah.
I know it's impossible, especially nowadays, but think about us. We have hiding condition, we
Yes.
have conditional formatting, we have value list. So we want to be able to give our customers a solution that makes all the things that we can do in WebDirect.
Yeah. In that case, I would anticipate that group visibility would solve for that use case, because how we go about, some of the philosophies that guide us in features for Studio, like these type of user interactions, is really the spirit of FileMaker. So we look at, like, if we're talking about looking at inspiration for product development, we are inspired by FileMaker and what it can solve for. And sometimes that gives us an opportunity to take those problem statements and solve them in a new way that wasn't possible before. But anchoring that in visibility, we looked at FileMaker, and that's what led us to go through individual objects and then group-based and being able to override, but also gave us the chance for groups to rethink or improve upon group behavior. For example, in Studio, they're collapsible. And because Studio views are responsive, everything will shift up, and when you expand, move accordingly. Similarly, yesterday I was talking about data controls and then the ability of a data control to specify a record ID for field-based objects. There's a more expanded answer where that record ID can come from a group. So not only can you as a developer use a group to group up objects for maybe styling UI purposes, but you can also use a group to start specifying where that group's getting data to give you more granular control of how it's being represented in Studio. So
Cool, makes
that's
sense.
one example.
Do you get requests for like a super custom form? In other words, one where you could just draw the entire thing from a JSON object that gets back, including all the CSS, all the dimensions of the screen, all the colors, everything. So like a super advanced mode, easy to, a lot of rope with which to hang yourself, I think they sometimes say. Because I'm asking for it.
Yeah, I was about to say, are you asking if I get the request or asking me to build it?
Well, I'm asking. Well, I mean, I'm dreaming of it, but I'm
Okay.
asking if you've been asked that before.
Definitely, and I think what's so powerful about the Claris platform is the easy barrier of entry, in the sense that I'll use Studio as an example of creating a view, a form view can be very WYSIWYG, on the rails, a very guided experience. But what I think is so successful and what makes the Claris platform fun to use is you can dig deeper. What always makes me happy is hearing developer feedback of how all of you broke our sandbox. Like when we're developing features, we're imagining it's going to be used this way based on feedback, and we think there's these constraints in place, and the things like insert from URL comes to mind, and its evolution over time, and how that's powering so much of the platform. And when we embarked on introducing that script step, we actually did it from kind of a simple perspective.
Yeah. The name of that script step seems kind of dumb now, doesn't it? Sorry.
I can't disagree with that. That is true. And so for when I think about views and thinking about the connector and programmatically creating views, going from that no code to low code to kind of this, I'll categorize it as pro code of exposing the JSON and the CSS and giving developers the opportunity to construct that JSON, and Studio honors it based on like a formalized format is very powerful in the direction we want to head.
Sweet. Javier, you and I have talked about authentication. So the Claris ID issue has been, I think, a stumbling block for a lot of people that I've talked to for implementing Studio, because they want to be able to have people have more secure access to it, not just the public side. And nobody wants to ask their customers to get Claris IDs. So you talked a little bit about that yesterday, and that was one of the other top 5 things I was really excited about.
Great.
So tell me more about that. What's the plan? I'm not asking when, I'm not asking priority stack this time.
That'll be the follow-up question.
No?
No.
Javier can ask it. If Javier wants to, he can, but I'm not.
Yeah, I think a couple thoughts I wanted to share. When we talk about Claris ID being a North Star for authentication across all Claris properties, a key distinction is Claris ID doesn't mean that we want to store the username and password hash or force users to do that in like our Cognito. What that North Star and that vision means is that a user can, from a single email, be fully identifiable across Claris properties. So with that same email, you could log into your FileMaker solution, your Studio solution, or Connect. That email we have no desire to own that email through our own implementation of Claris ID. So what I wanted to show in the dialogue yesterday is how we're opening up those configuration options with opportunities for Azure AD support, ADFS, sign in with Google, sign in with Apple, because by taking that route, users don't hit that friction point of having to sign up with a Claris ID. They can bring their own identity provider, and we expect that to be the most common use case.
Yeah.
We provide Claris ID, like our version of Claris ID on Cognito, more as a fallback for those rare cases where a user doesn't want to sign in with Apple, as an example,
But
and just
then
wants to
is
create an
it
account.
creating a Claris ID on the back end? So like what I'm envisioning is someone goes to a web page, they click a button to say sign up for the service.
Yep.
They click the button to say authenticate via Google, which is what I usually do.
Yep.
And then immediately they have access to it, whatever access they have. And then that in the background also makes a Claris ID and connects it with their Google ID, or what's happening?
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
So what that would mean is what's valuable about them bringing their email outside of convenience is internally we would have a mapping, which I think you're kind of referring to as Claris ID, because for like Studio using the record revision history feature I showed yesterday, it's still valuable to know, Matt@gmail.com made the change, but Matt@gmail doesn't have to be a Claris ID.
Yeah.
At that point, it's really a user identifier, which where the naming gets confusing, you could consider that a Claris ID, but it's really a UUID to email mapping.
I really wish my email was matt@gmail.com, by the way.
I have a question about security.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Our website is goldwave.es, the website or our event. So we have a button that says buy tickets. And when they click, a new window is open, which is platform.claris.com / blah, 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 which maybe the user doesn't trust that that's something from our event. So is there any option or, I don't know, to change this URL to make something more friendly or more, not secure, but, that we can include a word from our event or from our company inside the URL? It's a question of trust.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. We have gotten that question before. A couple of approaches come to mind with obviously different solutions. One common request is, can we make the URL a little bit more user-friendly or shorter, maybe prettier? Another way to solve the use case you just outlined that we're exploring is allowing Studio to be like embedded in an iframe within a website you control. So maybe your pop-up would point to your domain, but it would be a container, if you will, in Studio would be in an iframe, and that would be transparent to the user. Longer down the line, we've had a lot of discussions about what it means to have a custom domain. Maybe that's a subdomain off of platform.claris.com, or the ability for you to use your company's domain. But those are some of the approaches we're thinking through.
Yeah, like for example, the experience at Wix. Working with Studio makes me feel a lot like Wix in terms of the drag and drop, the ability to control everything, the automatic. But of course, it goes way beyond that because you can connect to data in a much more meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. Agreed. Yeah. But right now, with Studio's infrastructure, it follows the same strategy as cloud to get you to the nearest data center. But if you did start early with Studio, either with ETS or in production, when we first launched Studio, we were only in US West. So if you're there now and you want to move, we do have the capabilities to do that migration.
So it's not like an automatic thing where it's accessible to whatever data center is closer and using. AWS has technology, obviously, on the back end to do that, but that's not happening that way now.
It is now. It wasn't before.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to get. I want to talk, well, I'm going to open it up to some questions so you guys start thinking about it. But before we get there, I want to talk about evangelism because evangelist to evangelist. I actually was super lucky to have that as my title for a while, but you're the king of evangelism. So I guess the bigger question is, how are we going to, as a community, how are you as Claris going to be trying to spread the word on this? And maybe secondarily, going into things that the community can develop that would be useful. For example, in Connect, if custom connectors were able to be published, and so that there could be a community of connectors, that would take a lot of the load off of Claris of having to keep them all updated.
Agree on that, 100%.
Is that,
I mean, philosophically, I agree with that 100%.
Okay.
I can't
Cool.
speak for the engineering department on that.
well, engineer?
Agreed 100%.
Wow. So I guess my priority stack question again then. You're looking for, is this over yet, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think about, because we've been down this path for so many years, kind of how we really caught fire with FileMaker, right? And you know, back in the 90s, it was a young platform in a very competitive space, and everybody was trying to win it. And this community really rose up, I think. I mean, Claris did its share of marketing, but I didn't think it was a really defensible, solid business relational platform until Chris Moyer wrote the book. And suddenly it was. Like, I could defend it to someone that this product was that good. And, you know, back when we had, what was it FileMaker Talk? What was the the email service that everybody was on back in the day?
AOL?
No, we had our own, it wasn't a bulletin board, it was an email server, right?
I think
What do we call
Apple
it?
ID?
No, was it
Back then?
FileMaker Talk? What do we call it?
FileMaker
Like-
Talk's my podcast.
It is now.
Yeah, well, Claris Talk AI is my podcast now.
No, I'm just thinking of the old, you know, email service that everybody would glom onto and just share ideas. And you know, people were one-upping each other all the time and check out what I just built. You know, let's figure out how to do this
Yeah.
better.
Well, we have like the slug, for a lot of people who are in that Slack slug group.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think we have those resources. I think as these new tools are coming out, the more we have opportunities to really show off, and AI, I think, is starting to catch that fire, right? Like, so the influence that you're having with Claris Talk AI, I think, is pretty broad. I don't know, you know, how many views you get, but I watch it quite a lot, and you know, we're doing now the Claris Talk, whatever we're doing, the you know, our own version of a podcast, if you will, and people are watching that. And when I was in Japan last week, one of our partners there is literally watching everyone, transcribing everything to Japanese, subtitling it, and sharing it with the community there. And you know, last year when I was there was a lot of curiosity about what AI might mean. This year I was there, and there were, you know, 9 sessions deeply rooted in AI and doing some really advanced things, and the community has, you know, just leapt forward quickly. So yeah, I think the more we can support each other and you know, test these new technologies and get comfortable with them, you know, evangelism isn't just Claris broadcasting, right?
Right.
It's got to be us working together to tell the
Well,
story.
it's about the excitement. I think one of
Yeah.
the things that you and I think most people in the room have always just been excited about FileMaker. That's why we still use it. So I guess kind of keeping the excitement about the things coming with Studio. I think this is, you know, this discussion is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think we're creating new mental models, right? I heard Joris talking about that in his session today. Because the tool set is a little different than the FileMaker tool set. It's a different design surface and different tools, and what is this JavaScript thing I'm doing, right? But the more we get comfortable with those things, and then Studio feels more reflexive in the way that FileMaker does, then I think, our dialogue goes to a new level, right? And we start talking more deeply about the things that we can build. So I'm bullish on where we're going, and I think the more we can get more people with fingers on keyboards building things with Studio, I love the product when I do get to play with it, which isn't enough, right? I think more people get to do that, catch Joris's energy out of his session.
Yeah.
It's going to be good for us all.
It was really bold to invite everybody to the ETS program at the conference. That was another really inspiring move. I know you're only going to approve four people to be members, but
So that's up to Robert Holsey, and it was actually funny because he texted Wes and I last night and said, "So we got 13 new signups. Did you guys do something?"
that's funny.
So I told him there might be 200 before the day's out, and I hope there is. But yeah, he'll meter it so that we can, gracefully invite people in. But yeah, the more people we can get using it.
Having looked at it a little bit, right? So you're totally doing the eat your own dog food thing. Anyway, the 5 Americans get that one.
Some people say drink your own champagne.
That's much better.
It's much better.
I like that one much better because I don't think I've ever tasted my dog's food. Where was I going with that? So the community thing that you've built in Studio for feedback is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great use case of Studio. So who did that?
Who did that, Wes?
Robert built that.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
Robert did that.
Tell him thanks. So is there anything else you wanted to say about the evangelism? I think that was actually pretty good answer.
Was it a good answer?
Well, I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
I'm not sure what I said.
It gave Matt an opportunity to plug his podcast
It didn't-
twice.
Oh, God. No, he plugged my podcast twice.
I did plug it, and if you're not watching Claris Talk AI, I think you should. I really think it's a great dialogue that the community needs to pay attention to. I think there are others. I think we've been spending more time with Richard on his podcast, right? And that's been great. You get out to a good audience there, and there are many of us that are telling the story. The more we can support each other in doing it, I think it's great. By the way, I got a lot of really positive feedback this week on the story of Odaki Railway that we presented in the keynote, and these stories are what I live for. Man, I love it. And I don't know if Frederick is still in the room, but telling the story of Exacta Photo and more, there's a reason I'm in this job, right? I was a developer, came back to Claris, was an SE, but really found a joy for just telling the story of what other people are doing with the platform. It gives me energy, right? And so let's share more of them. If you're making those stories, shout them out.
All right, yeah. Well, we got some time for Q&A. I wanted to leave some good time. We have 45 minutes for Q&A, is that right, guys? I know it's only 15.
Okay,
Vinny.
multi-part question, I'm sorry. So first part is AI related. Will there ever be, in the future of Claris Studio, code generation of Claris Studio? And the way I want to frame that is also that right now it's starting off as the way FileMaker started off, which is low code, just drag the objects, anybody can do it, There is a bit of code there that was shown by Joris, where you
tiny
type in those
dialog
calculations, and you need to know that. But in a sense, anybody can do it. Is it going to evolve into a pro code platform? Will there be code generation opportunities? And then I have a follow-up question.
And by the way, that's a little bit at what I was hinting at with the advanced mode question, like the big block of everything.
Is this on our North Stars?
You want to? Oh. Yeah, Vince, thanks for the question, because that is kind of the second half of the answer around AI. One, for what it can mean for end users, but what does it mean for developers? Internally, we use AI to help us engineer code. And that is a vision we have for the platform as well, to help you as developers leverage those tool sets for AI-assisted development. I could easily imagine a world where you don't have to know every function and every parameter to be successful in either FileMaker scripting or Studio development, similar to what we see with what's going on with GitHub and Visual Studio Code. We're very much inspired by the development tools we use and are looking to bring those same capabilities to the Claris platform. Yeah.
And then a follow-up is, will we have tools like web viewers in Claris Studio and scripting like we have in FileMaker Pro in Claris Studio? Well, is that even a concept, because it's JavaScript based and like scripting in the way we understand scripting in FileMaker Pro?
Yeah, not, I think they, well, I'm just gonna let you answer it. Because I was thinking that the answer sort of yesterday was Claris Connect was that, but I'm just gonna shut up.
I could see it as a mixture. I think the use cases that require FileMaker scripting will exist in Studio. And I believe Studio needs to solve those use cases. Is that solution like scripting as FileMaker knows it? Probably some permutation of it, not too dissimilar. And so I think that will carry forward, and I would expect it's something that's approachable. Maybe there's a couple different paths going to like pro-code development where it's pure JavaScript being exposed to a developer, or maybe something in between that's more like FileMaker's macro scripting language, so you don't have to really worry about exception handling or compile time errors. So yes, there was
Is that an
part, web viewers, embedded web viewers. From a front-end perspective, that's fairly straightforward and doable. There'd be some considerations about security settings between like cross-site scripting, because if we're starting to host a domain we don't own, our backbone's got to allow for those security exceptions. So I'd have to give that one a bit of a pause and think through the implications there.
You were talking yesterday that you're adopting the open API through the whole platform studio, and I guess Connect as well.
Yeah.
So like custom connectors, I suppose they're also following that open API structure, more or less. Because why I'm asking, wouldn't it be great that we just can import an open API spec, for example, from OpenAI? They have the specs online. And just import it and let it create custom connectors. Because now custom connectors is really a tedious, I think, okay, we all played with it, people in ETS, but to build really a custom connector is a lot of work. So I think it would be great to just import open API specs and then it creates your custom connector. No?
Love it, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Can
I
we get a
won't
longer
ask
answer?
for the timeline.
It's a great idea, because if I hear the use case, to repeat it back to you, is there's a specification, open API specification. Claris uses it. Tons of companies use it. So the next logical step is take that specification, process it, and output a custom connector, because it's following a common template.
Because a lot of APIs use the
Yeah.
and then just import it and have your custom connector.
Yeah, that kind of really goes to Vincenzo's question too. Sorry. Actually, go ahead.
I was just going to say, given Postman can generate JavaScript
Yes.
or Python code to interact with something from that spec, you would expect that it would be, I'm not going to say super easy, but certainly technically doable.
Yeah, Ian's talking about how Postman can generate the script, so for people who didn't hear his question.
Yep.
Longer answer again?
Agreed 100%.
Wow, that's still...
I have a question for Wes. Yesterday, you sort of intimated that there were possibly some scenarios where you might entertain the idea of giving developers direct access to MongoDB.
Yep.
Under, could you expand on, what specific scenarios those might be and what conditions that might be allowed?
You should make Andy answer.
What I think is most important is the use cases where you as developer want that access. That's what will be really insightful to us, because there's opportunities in us in engineering to provide those capabilities. We could give you like a direct access to Mongo, but what really helps us a lot is to understand the problem statements and like the business problems you're solving for your customers or internally, because then we can kind of brainstorm together and see if is direct access to Mongo the right idea, or is there something else we can partner with you on to solve that problem that might be a little bit more robust, more performant, or maintainable. But technically, there's no blockers for us to be able to spin up any number of databases. Like, do you want Mongo? Do you want Cassandra or Postgres? And that's where if we could understand the business use cases, I think we could come up with an optimal solution. That'd be my start.
Thanks. Thanks for all your insights here. I have two questions for you. Yeah, sorry. First off, I really like to see that Studio might become like more individual friendly. Like now the information is for everyone. So that once you log in, you actually see things that are for you only, but being able to switch to see everything. And right now it would be really, really hard to program it to only show your information because the filtering would be really hard to manage. So maybe that would be something you can consider in the future, to add a layer to show only information that's required for you only.
I think we intend that, right? And please.
Yes, and that's why my answer to Matt was around emails and being able to map like a UUID, because that ownership, I think is, you're saying, is like per records. So which user has access to these records, whether it's a permission model or ownership model. And so with that information, we imagine a near future where it's query based. So when a user logs in, there's an initial query that runs against the permissions to say only, show only the records that Johan has access to, or the views Johan has access to. And then you as developers could specify if the user could break out of that barrier or be constrained by it.
That sounds perfect. Looking forward to that. Okay, I follow up on what Chris said there. So MongoDB for me is like one of the go-to databases for if you're working with web.
Okay.
And if you have a lot of web traffic today with CWP or Data API or OData, there are tons of limitations we have to cope with towards our own databases where we have them right now in FileMaker. Having MongoDB as a possibility for the web to use our data sources using either through ESS or directly to Studio would be hugely beneficial for all the web agent or APIs, whatever we might want to have, to access our data. Not necessarily through Studio, but just to access your data. Would it be a possibility to build our own APIs on top of Studio using MongoDB as a data source and benefit of all the stuff we can do in MongoDB?
So I think a clarification I would make is there's two important layers here. One, there's the core Mongo layer where the raw database reads and writes happen. And then above that is what I was describing as the data access layer that all clients use. So because of the open API specification, in your use case, using that famous insert from URL script step, you could today do a curl call or use the Studio connector to make essentially the database API calls. The data access layer is really just an abstraction layer that talks to the database. So you could use that for your use case currently with the right authentication token. If you so desired, you could build your own Studio front-end clone and start using our Mongo as your own data source. And then the second part of your question, for use cases where you would want new APIs into Mongo, as this example, I would expect that our use cases would cross over a lot. So the APIs you're desiring are probably on our roadmap already, but I think that'd be a great partnership. Yeah.
Quick question. I'm hoping that the next data center for FileMaker Cloud is going to be in the Asia Pacific region, and if so, when?
So Andrew's from Australia.
Okay.
So he's looking for data center locality. I don't know that we have a specific plan, but
I think they're going to open up a Southern California one, which is closer than the one currently in Oregon. That's closer. I'll let you answer.
I don't have an answer.
I mean, Andrew, thanks. I think we have a vision to get data centers where our customers are, and we need to do it there. Right now with Studio, it's Germany, the U.S., and Japan is it right now, right? But it's vision, not plan. Don't have an announcement today, but the question is good.
There is a data center in Australia, AWS. Yeah, okay, yeah. I know AWS, I guess it's been a while since I looked, but I thought the closest one wasn't actually there. It was like in Singapore or something. Okay, okay.
And as Andy said, our goal and our vision is that the studio data centers do map the FileMaker Cloud data centers. So it's just a matter of when, which, not if, and I think your question was when. So stay tuned for more info.
Let's
Yes.
say I'm building a client portal in Studio, so for the clients of my client. I don't want to have them log in with Google or Microsoft, but I also don't want to have them request a Claris ID. Would it be possible in Studio, would Studio be able to act as its own identity provider?
That is a good question. That use case, not on our immediate roadmap. Some of the considerations and reluctance is around the security model surrounding that. So when we're talking about authentication, we're talking about usernames and passwords, really sensitive data. Kind of what I'm reading into your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is will Studio have the local account concept that FileMaker does? The short answer is no. For clever developers, I think you would be able to develop your own system with the flexibility of Studio, similar to what you could do in FileMaker today if you're kind of doing kind of FileMaker
Like
multi-tenancy.
store it as a data table kind of a thing? and-
Pretty much.
Yeah, like one-way hash the password kind of a thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think those tools will be in place, but there's not current plans for Studio to provide like local accounts, because also that doesn't align with our North Star of a single identity across all properties, because then your identity would be scattershot throughout the system in a less manageable way. There, if I'm tracking your follow-up, there are pursuits to make kind of adding users, managing users more programmatic. So as a developer, you'll be able to do that without the user having to sign up or worrying about it, and you can handle it on their behalf. That is on our radar and on our roadmap, independent of the local account concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Next year there will be a European Accessibility Act coming through, and I was wondering what your plans are for making Studio compliant with that.
Planned. More specific of in general timelines, or because at the core of my answer is accessibility is top of mind. It always has been for the FileMaker product line, specifically like Pro and Go continues to be on Studio. So that's an effort we'll continue to advance and invest in.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Andy, maybe? Or Javier? Not that I'm sure you mind answering all the rest of them.
Happy to.
You're doing a great job.
Appreciate it.
We have time for 36 more questions. Or, what time
I
is
have a
it?
question.
Oh yeah, it's actually exactly on the dot for time.
Oh, it is time?
Which is crazy if we can end exactly on the dot.
was
Thank
gonna-
you so much for,
I was going to ask when
you were gonna ask?
when you're going to start the Claris Studio Talk podcast.
So thanks very much, panel. Let's record a session or a segment on the podcast today and talk about it. I've recorded a few segments here, so if you have something to say on the podcast, hit me up and we'll record.
Right on.
Another plug, sorry.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks,
Matt.
everyone.